The village of Velmont lay shrouded in an eternal mist, nestled in a valley where sunlight seemed to falter, its rays weak and fleeting, as if terrified to pierce the gloom. Its cobblestone streets twisted like the gnarled roots of some ancient, malevolent tree, weaving through rows of stone houses, houses whose slate roofs glistened with moss and perpetual drizzle, their facades weathered by centuries of secrets. Towering pines encircled the village, their branches whispering in the wind, their needles carpeting the ground, muffling footsteps as if the forest itself conspired to silence Velmont's truths. Jagged cliffs loomed overhead, their scarred faces etched with fissures that resembled screaming mouths in the half-light of dawn or dusk, casting shadows that seemed to claw at the valley below. Velmont's history was a tapestry of fractured legends, tales of plagues that silenced the streets, witch hunts that filled the church's crypt with unmarked bones, and disappearances that defied explanation, from children lost to the forest to adults who vanished from their beds, leaving only whispers in their wake. The villagers spoke in hushed tones of strange lights flickering among the pines, of voices calling from the shadows when no one was near, of a darkness that clung to the valley like a curse, seeping into the soil, the air, the souls of those who dared to linger. Lina Albrecht, 16, stood at the edge of the village square, her breath fogging in the damp air, her dark hair clinging to her pale cheeks, damp from the ceaseless drizzle. Her hazel eyes, restless and searching, scanned the horizon, as if expecting something to emerge from the mist, a figure, a sign, a warning. In her arms, she clutched a leather-bound tome, its cover worn smooth by countless hands, its edges frayed and blackened as if kissed by fire, its weight both comforting and oppressive, as if it carried secrets too vast for its brittle, yellowed pages. She'd found it 7 weeks ago in the attic of her family's new home, a decaying manor on Velmont's outskirts, inherited from a reclusive uncle her parents refused to name. The manor, with its sagging beams, peeling wallpaper, and creaking floors, seemed to breathe, its halls filled with drafts that whispered, its shadows alive with intent. "Lina, you'll catch your death out there," called her sister, Anna, from the doorway of the village bakery. At 19, Anna was pragmatism incarnate, blonde hair tied tightly back, blue eyes sharp with impatience, her hands dusted with flour from the morning's work. Her apron was stained with dough, and her voice carried the weary tone of someone forced to hold the family together through their uprooted lives, a role she'd taken on since their move. "Come inside. The bread's fresh, and Father's waiting." Lina didn't move, her fingers tightening around the tome, its leather warm against her skin despite the chill, as if it pulsed with a life of its own. She'd skimmed its pages the previous night, but the words, scrawled in a jagged, frantic hand, had burrowed into her mind like thorns, sharp and unyielding. Asterisk, the whispers are alive. They see you. They know your secrets. Asterisk, the text was a chaotic blend of Latin, an archaic dialect she couldn't decipher, and fragments of poetry that made her head ache, their rhythm hypnotic, almost alive. One phrase haunted her, repeated on nearly every page, scratched so deeply it tore the paper, "Susurrimi tenent, the whispers hold me." "I'm fine," Lina murmured, her voice nearly lost in the wind's low moan, a sound that seemed to carry voices, faint and unintelligible, weaving through the pines. "Just thinking." Anna sighed, brushing flour from her apron with a flick of her wrist, her eyes narrowing with concern. "You've been strange since we moved here. It's that book, isn't it? You're always clutching it, staring at it like it's going to speak to you." "You're scaring me, Lina, and I don't scare easy." "It's not mine," Lina said, her tone sharper than intended, her fingers digging into the tome's cover, its leather yielding under her touch. "I found it. It's different." Anna crossed her arms, her brow furrowing, her blue eyes flashing with frustration. "Different how?" It's just some old book, Lina. You're scaring yourself with it. You've been like this ever since we left the city, jumpy, quiet, always lost in your head. Come on, before Mother has a fit. Lina followed reluctantly, the tome pressed against her chest, its weight grounding her even as it unsettled her. The manor, their home for barely a month, was too vast, too cold, its halls echoing with creaks and drafts that felt like whispers, soft but insistent, slithering through the cracks. The walls were lined with faded portraits, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow her, their expressions caught between sorrow and accusation, as if they knew her secrets. Heavy velvet curtains blocked what little light dared enter, and the air carried a faint scent of decay, as if the house were rotting from within, its bones groaning under the weight of its past. Their parents, Heinrich and Lina Albrecht, had called the move a fresh start after Heinrich's trading business collapsed, leaving them drowning in debt and shame. But Velmont didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a place where time had stopped, trapped in the grip of something ancient and hungry, where shadows watched, waited, and pressed against the edges of reality. *****. That night, Lina sat cross-legged on her bed, the tome open before her, its pages glowing faintly in the candlelight. A single candle cast flickering shadows across the walls, their shapes twisting like dancers in a fevered dream, their edges sharpening into claws, then softening, only to sharpen again. The room was cold, the air thick with the scent of mildew and something sharper, metallic, like blood, a scent that lingered in her throat. The tome's pages were yellowed, some crumbling at the edges, and the text was a labyrinth of madness, part diary, part incantation, written in a mix of Latin, an archaic dialect, and cryptic symbols that seemed to shift when she stared too long, as if alive, mocking her attempts to understand. The phrase "sussurri mi tenent" appeared again and again, scratched so deeply it left grooves, as if the writer had been desperate to carve their truth into the world, to make it undeniable. Her finger traced the words, her lips forming them silently, drawn to them despite herself. The air grew colder, the candle flame trembling as if caught in a draft, its light dimming as if struggling to survive. A floorboard creaked outside her door, slow and deliberate, like a footstep testing the wood, its sound sharp in the silence. Lina froze, her heart thudding against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that echoed in her ears, drowning out the quiet. "Anna," she whispered, her voice trembling, barely audible, swallowed by the dark. No response. The creak came again, circling her room, joined by another, then another, as if something were pacing just beyond the door, its steps measured, deliberate, patient. The shadows on the walls thickened, pooling in the corners, their edges sharpening into claws, fingers, faces that flickered and vanished, their eyes, if they had eyes, boring into her soul. Lina's breath hitched as she clutched the tome, its leather pulsing faintly, as if it had a heartbeat, warm and alive against her skin, its presence both comforting and terrifying. "Lina," the voice was low, guttural, not her sister's, slithering through the air, coming from nowhere and everywhere, wrapping around her like smoke, heavy with malice, its tone both inviting and threatening, promising secrets and pain. She scrambled back, knocking the candle over, wax spilling across the floor, the flame snuffed out, plunging the room into darkness so complete it felt like a weight pressing against her chest. The voice laughed, a wet, hollow sound that crawled up her spine, making her skin prickle with dread, her stomach twisting with nausea, her hands shaking as she clutched the tome tighter. "Who's there?" she screamed, her voice breaking, raw with panic, echoing in the dark, unanswered. Silence, heavy and suffocating. Then, a whisper, so close it grazed her ear, cold and sharp as a blade, "You opened the tome. Now we see you." Lina fumbled for the candle, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the match twice before relighting it, the flame flaring weak and unsteady, casting a sickly glow. The shadows retreated, slinking back to the corners, but they lingered at the edges of her vision, watching, waiting. The air remained heavy, oppressive, as if the room were holding its breath, anticipating something unspeakable. She stared at the tome, its pages open to a new entry she didn't remember seeing. Asterisk, they come when you call. They never leave. Asterisk, the words were written in her own looping handwriting, though she hadn't touched a pen, the ink glistening as if wet, smelling faintly of iron, its scent sharp in her nose. Her stomach twisted, and she slammed the tome shut, shoving it under her pillow, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. She curled into a ball, pulling the blankets over her head, but the whispers lingered, faint and insistent, like a chorus just beyond hearing, their voices weaving together in a language she didn't understand but felt in her bones, a pull that made her blood hum. She didn't sleep that night, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for the creaks to return, her heart pounding with the certainty that something was watching, its presence a cold weight in the dark, a hunger that never slept. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, Lina barely spoke at breakfast, her hands trembling as she pushed her porridge around her bowl, the spoon clinking against the ceramic with a nervous rhythm. The manor's dining room was cavernous, its high ceilings lost in shadow, its chandelier dangling like a skeleton of crystal and iron, its candles unlit, their wax dripping like tears onto the table below. Heinrich was buried in his ledgers, muttering about creditors and unpaid loans, his face etched with exhaustion, his dark hair streaked with gray, his hands trembling as he turned the pages, as if the numbers were accusations, each one a wound. Elise fussed over a chipped teacup, her hands trembling slightly, her green eyes darting to the windows as if expecting something to peer through, her lips moving silently, perhaps in prayer, perhaps in fear. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the family's silence louder than words, a weight that pressed against Lina's chest. Anna noticed Lina's pallor, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands twitched, her fingers never far from the satchel where the tome was hidden. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Anna said as they walked to the village school, a squat stone building beside the ancient church. The path was slick with mud, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine, the mist clinging to their clothes, cold and damp against their skin. "What's wrong, Lina? And don't say nothing." Lina hesitated, her fingers tightening around the satchel, the tome's weight a constant reminder, its presence a shadow in her mind. "I heard something last night," she admitted, her voice low, barely audible over the wind's moan, which seemed to carry voices, faint and unintelligible, weaving through the pines. "In my room. It spoke to me." Anna stopped walking, her eyes narrowing, her blonde hair catching the faint light filtering through the mist, her hands clenching her apron. "Spoke to you? What are you talking about?" "It wasn't human," Lina said, her voice trembling, her eyes darting to the pines as if they were listening, their branches swaying as if in response, their needles falling in patterns that seemed too deliberate. "It knew my name. It said I opened the tome, and now they see me." Anna glanced at the satchel, her expression a mix of worry and exasperation, her hands trembling slightly. "You're scaring yourself with that thing. It's just an old book, Lina. Probably some madman's diary from 100 years ago. You're letting it get in your head." "It's not just a diary," Lina snapped, her voice sharper than she meant, her hands shaking as she gripped the satchel, the tome's leather warm through the fabric. "There's something wrong with it. I can feel it. It's alive." Anna crossed her arms, her lips thinning, her blue eyes flashing with frustration, though fear lingered beneath. alive? Lina, listen to yourself. You're acting like it's cursed or something. If it's freaking you out this much, get rid of it. Burn it, throw it in the stream, whatever. But stop letting it ruin you. The word cursed hung between them, heavy and sharp, like a blade poised to fall. Lina wanted to tell Anna everything, the voice, the shadows, the way the tome pulsed in her hands, warm and eager, as if it wanted her, but fear choked her words, her throat tight with panic, her heart racing. Instead, she hugged the satchel closer and hurried ahead, her boots splashing in the mud, the pines leaning closer, their whispers louder, their needles forming shapes that made her skin crawl. At school, Lina couldn't focus, her mind consumed by the tome, its words echoing in her head, its weight a constant pull. The teacher, Frau Kessler, a stern woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, lectured on Velmont's history, tales of plagues that left bodies piled in the square, witch hunts that filled the church's crypt with unmarked bones, and disappearances that defied explanation, from children who wandered into the forest to adults who vanished, leaving only whispers and empty beds. But Lina's eyes drifted to the church outside the window, its steeple piercing the gray sky like a crooked finger, its stained glass windows pulsing, their colors shifting unnaturally, reds and blues bleeding into each other like wounds, their figures, saints and angels, seeming to move, their eyes following her when she looked away. During lunch, Lina slipped away, drawn to the church as if by an invisible thread, her boots silent on the cobblestones, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and compulsion. The heavy oak doors groaned as she pushed them open, revealing a dim interior thick with the scent of wax, dust, and decay, the air heavy with the weight of centuries, pressing against her skin. The pews were empty, the air still, the altar draped in faded cloth embroidered with symbols that seemed to writhe in the half-light, their shapes unfamiliar but unsettling, tugging at her memory. Above it hung a cracked crucifix, the carved Christ staring down with hollow, accusing eyes that seemed to see through her, their gaze heavy with judgment, making her shiver. Lina approached the altar, the tome trembling in her hands, its leather warm, almost feverish. She didn't know why she brought it here, only that it felt necessary, inevitable, as if the book had guided her, its whispers urging her forward, promising answers, or perhaps something darker. She opened it to a random page, and the words writhed under her gaze, asterisk they are hungry. They will take you, asterisk the text was smeared, as if written in haste, the ink glistening like fresh blood, its edges curling as if alive, the page pulsing faintly under her fingers, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. A shadow moved behind the altar, formless, too tall, its edges fraying like smoke, its shape shifting as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be, a figure one moment, a mass of limbs the next. It flickered, then vanished, leaving the air colder, heavier, the scent of rot stronger, clogging her throat. Lina's breath caught, her heart pounding, but before she could turn, a hand gripped her shoulder, its fingers cold and bony, digging into her flesh. She screamed, spinning to find Father Matthias, the village priest, staring down at her, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken, as if sleep had abandoned him years ago, his skin pale as parchment, stretched tight over his bones. His black robes hung loosely, and his hands trembled, clutching a rosary, its beads worn smooth, darkened by sweat and fear, clicking softly as he moved. "What are you doing here, child?" His voice was soft but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk, his eyes fixed on the tome, his gaze heavy with dread, as if he saw something in it that terrified him. I wanted to see the church," Lina stammered, hiding the tome behind her back, her fingers digging into its leather, her heart racing, her voice barely audible. Matthias's eyes narrowed, catching the movement, his lips pressing into a thin line, his voice dropping to a whisper. That book. Where did you find it? In my house, she said, stepping back, her boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound echoing in the silent church, sharp and jarring. The manor. It was in the attic. His face darkened, his voice trembling with urgency. That house is tainted. Things were done there, things best forgotten. Give me the book, Lina. She shook her head, her grip tightening, the tome's weight grounding her, its warmth spreading through her hands, up her arms, into her chest. It's mine. It's dangerous, he hissed, reaching for it, his fingers brushing the air inches from her, his eyes wild with a mix of fear and desperation. You don't know what you're holding. Give it to me, now. Lina bolted, dodging his grasp and running for the door, her boots pounding against the stone, the sound swallowed by the church's vastness, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. His shouts echoed behind her, a mix of Latin and desperation, his voice cracking as he called her name, pleading, commanding, warning. She didn't stop until she was outside, panting in the cold air, the mist curling around her like fingers, the tome pressed against her chest, its leather warm and pulsing, as if it had absorbed her fear and fed on it, growing stronger, hungrier. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. That night, Lina locked her bedroom door and wedged a chair against it, her hands trembling as she moved the heavy wood, her breath hitching with every creak of the manor. She didn't light a candle. The darkness felt safer, less likely to draw their attention, though she wasn't sure what they were, only that they were real, their presence a constant weight. But the shadows moved anyway, slithering across the walls, forming shapes, hands reaching, faces twisting, eyes that blinked and vanished, their edges sharp and hungry, their movements deliberate. The air was thick, oppressive, carrying the faint scent of rot and something sweeter, like decaying flowers, a scent that made her stomach churn, her head spin. She opened the tome, her hands shaking despite herself, drawn to it as if compelled, unable to resist its pull. The pages had changed, some entries in her own looping handwriting, though she had no memory of writing them, asterisk they're inside me. They're hungry, asterisk others were in a language she couldn't read, the letters twisting like worms, curling into symbols that made her eyes ache, her head throb with a pain that felt alive, pulsing in time with the tome. Her stomach churned as she read, the words burning into her mind, each one a weight pressing against her thoughts, pulling her deeper into its grasp, a labyrinth with no exit. Lina. Anna's voice came through the door, sharp with worry, her fist pounding against the wood, the sound jarring in the silence. Open the door. You're scaring me. Lina hesitated, her fingers lingering on the tome, its leather warm and pulsing, almost feverish. She shoved it under her pillow and unlocked the door, moving the chair aside with trembling hands, her movements slow, reluctant. Anna stood in the hallway, her nightgown pale against the dark, her face etched with concern, her blue eyes wide with fear she tried to hide, her hands clenched at her sides. What's wrong with you? Anna demanded, stepping inside, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound firm, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting to find something lurking in the shadows. You've been acting like a lunatic all day. You barely ate, you didn't speak at dinner, and now you're barricading yourself in here. What's going on, Lina? I'm fine, Lina lied, but her voice cracked, betraying her, her hands shaking as she clutched the edge of her bed, her knuckles white. Just bad dreams. Anna's eyes flicked to the pillow, where the edge of the tome peeked out, its leather gleaming faintly in the moonlight filtering through the window, its presence a silent accusation. It's that book, isn't it? Let me see it. No. Lina lunged, blocking her, her hands trembling, her voice sharp with panic, her heart racing. "It's private." Anna's eyes widened, her voice softening but firm, her hands clenching tighter. "Lina, you're shaking. Your hands are ice cold. What's in that thing?" Before Lina could answer, the room grew colder, the air thick with the scent of rot and decaying flowers, the sweetness cloying, suffocating, making her gag. The shadows on the walls twisted, coalescing into a figure, a woman, her face blurred, her hands clawing at the air, her form fraying at the edges like torn cloth, her presence heavy with hunger, her silhouette radiating malice. Anna gasped, stumbling back, her eyes darting around the room, her breath hitching as she clutched the doorframe, her hands trembling. "Do you see her?" Lina whispered, her voice trembling, her heart pounding so hard it hurt, her hands gripping the bed frame to keep from collapsing, her nails digging into the wood. "See what?" Anna's voice was sharp, but her eyes were wide, searching the empty corners, her hands shaking as she gripped the doorframe tighter, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The figure vanished, dissolving into the shadows, but the air remained heavy, the room too small, too dark, the walls seeming to close in, their presence oppressive. "There's nothing there, Lina," Anna said, but her voice wavered, her hands trembling as she stepped closer, her eyes fixed on her sister, searching for answers. "You're imagining it. You're exhausted, and that book is messing with your head." But Lina knew it wasn't her imagination. The woman had been real, her presence suffocating, her blurred face etched with hunger, her eyes, if she had any, boring into Lina's soul, seeing everything she was, everything she feared, everything she hid. And the tome under the pillow seemed to hum, a low, eager sound that vibrated through her bones, calling her back, urging her to open it, to read, to write, to surrender. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Over the next 2 weeks, Lina's world unraveled, thread by thread, her mind a battleground where her thoughts fought against the whispers, their voices growing louder, more insistent, weaving into her dreams, her waking moments, her very being. They whispered her name at all hours, urging her to read the tome, to write in it, their words a siren's call she couldn't resist. She tried to fight, locking it in a trunk, hiding it under her floorboards, burying it in the manor's overgrown garden, even throwing it into the stream that ran behind the house, but her hands moved on their own, retrieving it, opening it, scrawling words she didn't understand, asterisk susuri mi tenent. Susuri mi liberant, asterisk the whispers hold me. The whispers free me. Anna watched her sisters decline with growing desperation, her worry turning to a fierce, burning resolve. Lina's eyes were bloodshot, her skin pale as bone, her dark hair tangled and unwashed, hanging in clumps around her face, her hands trembling constantly. She barely ate, her plate untouched at meals, her eyes distant, as if listening to something no one else could hear, her movements sluggish, almost mechanical. At school, she sat alone, muttering to herself, the tome always at her side, its leather cover drawing curious glances and whispered rumors, the other children calling her witch or haunted, their voices cruel, their laughter sharp, their eyes filled with fear and fascination. Even Frau Kessler avoided her, crossing herself when Lina passed, her eyes filled with fear and pity, as if she saw something in Lina that wasn't human, something that made her pray under her breath. The village itself seemed to change, as if infected by the tome's presence, its atmosphere growing heavier, more oppressive. The mist thickened, clinging to the streets like a living thing, curling around lampposts, seeping into doorways, its tendrils cold and damp against the skin, leaving a chill that lingered in the bones. The pines whispered louder, their branches scratching at the manor's windows at night, their needles falling in patterns that resembled runes, their shapes shifting in the moonlight, forming symbols that no one dared decipher. Villagers avoided the Albrecht family, their glances wary, their conversations halting when Lina or Anna approached, their voices dropping to whispers, their eyes darting to the manor, its silhouette a dark stain against the cliffs. Lina overheard fragments of their talk, tales of the manor's previous owners, of screams heard in the night, of shadows that moved without light, of a darkness that had always been there, waiting, hungry. An old woman, Marta, who sold herbs in the square, muttered about a dark pact tied to the manor, her eyes darting to Lina's satchel before she hurried away, her hands trembling, her shawl clutched tightly around her shoulders. Marta was a fixture in Velmont, her stall cluttered with dried herbs, roots, and vials of murky liquid, their contents glowing faintly, her hands gnarled from years of work, her eyes sharp with knowledge she rarely shared. Greta, a reclusive widow at the forest's edge, watched Lina from her crooked porch, her gray hair wild, her eyes sharp and knowing, her face lined with secrets. Her house was a shrine to the strange, bones, feathers, jars of murky liquid, symbols carved into the walls, the trees, the ground, all matching those in the tome, their presence a silent warning. She rarely spoke, but her gaze was heavy, filled with pity or warning, her lips moving silently as if in prayer, or perhaps a curse. A scholar named Victor had arrived in Velmont weeks bore the Albrechts, a thin man with sharp features and eyes too old for his face, renting a room above the tavern, his days spent in the church's archives or wandering the cliffs with a leather-bound notebook, sketching symbols that matched the tomes, his presence unsettling the villagers, who called him a meddler, a man who asked too many questions about things best left buried. Lina had seen him watching her in the square, his gaze lingering on the tome, his expression unreadable but intense, as if he saw something in it that both fascinated and terrified him. Isolde, a strange child of 10, roamed the village's edges, her pale hair wild, her eyes too large, too knowing, as if she saw beyond the veil of the world. She spoke in riddles, her voice soft but piercing, and she seemed drawn to Lina, appearing near the manor or the school, watching from a distance, her small hands clutching a doll made of twigs and cloth, its face featureless, its presence unsettling. "The whispers like you," Isolde had said once, her voice barely audible, her eyes fixed on Lina's satchel, her doll's blank face staring up at her. "They chose you." And then there was Clara, a haunted villager in her 30s, who lived alone in a crumbling cottage near the church, her eyes hollow, her hands always trembling, as if she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. Clara was a ghost in Velmont, rarely speaking, her presence a reminder of the village's losses, her name whispered in connection to a sister who had vanished years ago, her body never found, her shoes left by the cliffs, just like Elias's uncle. Clara had seen Lina with the tome, her eyes widening, her hands clutching a locket she wore, its surface etched with symbols that matched those in the church's cloth, her voice trembling as she muttered, "It's back." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. One evening, Lina sat in the manor's library, a cavernous room filled with dusty tomes and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her, their paint cracked, their expressions twisted with sorrow or malice. She found a new entry in the tome, written in red ink, the letters jagged, asterisk "They know your fears. They know your sins. They will take you," asterisk beneath it was a drawing, crude but chilling, a figure with no face, its hands outstretched, surrounded by eyes that stared from the page, their pupils black and unblinking, their gaze piercing through her, seeing everything. Lina's hands shook as she slammed the tome shut, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps, her heart pounding so hard it hurt, her head spinning with the whispers chorus. That night, the whispers were relentless, filling her room, her head, her dreams, a chorus of voices that spoke in unison, asterisk write the words. "Set us free," asterisk she woke with a start, her hands clutching a pen, the tome open on her lap, a new page filled with her handwriting. Asterisk, the door is open. The whispers will rise. Asterisk, the ink was wet, smelling of iron, and her fingers were stained red, though she hadn't cut herself, the sight making her stomach lurch, her hands shaking as she dropped the pen, its clatter loud in the silence. She stumbled to the mirror, her reflection pale and gaunt, her hazel eyes flickering with something dark, something not her own, their depths endless, like voids. The room seemed to shift, the walls bending inward, the shadows pooling at her feet, their edges sharp and hungry, their movements deliberate, as if alive. She clutched the tome, unable to let go, its leather warm and pulsing, as if it were an extension of her body, her blood, her soul. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Anna's desperation grew, her resolve hardening into a fierce determination to save her sister, no matter the cost. She cornered Lina one morning in the manor's kitchen, where the air smelled of bread and ash, the hearth cold despite the fire that had burned the night before, its embers glowing faintly, casting eerie shadows. "You're not yourself," Anna said, her voice low but firm, her hands clenched, her blue eyes burning with fear and resolve, her heart pounding. "You're barely sleeping, barely eating. You're scaring mother and father, and you're scaring me. It's that book, Lina. It's doing something to you." Lina stared at the floor, her hands twisting in her lap, the tome on the table, its presence a silent accusation, its leather gleaming faintly, as if alive. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her hands trembling, her eyes distant. "It's not just a book. It's part of me now. Part of you." Anna's voice rose, sharp with frustration, her hands slamming on the table, making the tome jump, the sound jarring in the silence. "Lina, listen to yourself. You sound like you're losing your mind. Give me the book. We'll burn it, right now." Lina's head snapped up, her eyes wide, almost feral, her hands lunging for the tome, clutching it to her chest as if it were a child. "You can't. It won't let you." Anna froze, her breath catching, her heart pounding, her hands trembling as she stared at her sister, seeing something in her eyes that wasn't Lina, something dark, something hungry. "What do you mean, it won't let you?" Lina didn't answer, her eyes flickering with that darkness, her hands gripping the tome so tightly her knuckles turned white, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She fled to her room, locking the door, the bolts click echoing in the manor, a final barrier between her and the world. Anna pounded on it, shouting her name, but Lina didn't respond, the whispers too loud, drowning out her sister's voice, urging her to open the tome, to read, to write, to surrender completely. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The village wasn't blind to Lina's change, its people growing restless, their fear spreading like a plague. Elias, a lanky 17-year-old with tousled brown hair and nervous eyes, approached Anna after school, his hands stained with flour from the bakery, his smile gone, replaced by worry. They stood by the village well, the mist curling around them, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and pine, the well's depths dark, as if hiding something. "Is Lina okay?" Elias asked, his voice low, his eyes darting to the manor, its silhouette stark against the cliffs, its windows dark, uninviting. "She's different. People are talking, Anna. They're scared." Anna's jaw tightened, her hands clenching her apron, her nails digging into the fabric, her heart pounding. "She's fine. Just adjusting to the move." Elias shook his head, his eyes serious, his voice trembling. "That place has a reputation. My grandmother says it's cursed. Says the last people who lived there didn't leave. Not alive." They found clothes, shoes, but no bodies. Just gone. And there's talk of a book, a ledger. My grandmother said it took her brother, years ago. He'd mutter, write things no one could read. Then he was gone. They found his shoes by the cliffs, nothing else. She says the book is still out there, waiting. Anna's blood ran cold, but she forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow, her voice shaking. Your grandmother's full of stories, Elias. It's just a house. It's not just a house, he said, his voice urgent, his eyes fixed on hers, pleading. Be careful, Anna. Whatever's in that house, it's not right. And Lina, she's not herself. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Anna sought out Marta, driven by a gnawing unease that grew with each passing day. Marta's stall was cluttered with herbs, roots, and vials, their contents glowing faintly, her hands gnarled, her eyes sharp, fixed on Anna as if she'd been expecting her. What's wrong with your sister? Marta asked, her voice low, her gaze piercing, her hands clutching a bundle of sage, its scent sharp in the air. She carries something dark. I see it in her eyes, in the way she moves. It's not her anymore. Anna hesitated, her hands twisting in her apron, her heart pounding, her voice trembling. She found a book. In the manor. It's changing her. She's not eating, not sleeping. She says it speaks to her. Marta's face paled, her hands trembling, her voice dropping to a whisper. The ledger. It's not a book, girl. It's a trap. A doorway. It was sealed in that house for a reason. Your uncle, Dietrich, found it too. Thought he could use it, control it. But it took him. Drove him mad, then worse. Worse? Anna's voice was barely audible, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. Marta leaned closer, her breath sour with herbs, her eyes dark with fear. He became something else. Not human. The whispers took him, body and soul. They fed on him, used him. If your sister's got it, act fast. Burn it, if you can. But it won't burn easy. It wants her. How do I stop it? Anna asked, her voice breaking, her tears welling, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of Marta's stall. Marta's eyes darkened, her voice barely audible, heavy with warning. Blood. It always wants blood. But be careful, girl. The price is high. And it's not just her it wants. It wants all of you. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Anna visited Greta next, her desperation driving her to the widow's crooked house at the forest's edge, its walls sagging, its windows dark, surrounded by pines that seemed to guard it, their branches forming a canopy that blocked the sky. The air was heavy, the mist thicker, the ground littered with carved symbols, runes that matched the tomes, etched into stones, trees, the very earth, their presence a silent barrier. Greta stood on her porch, her staff carved with runes, her eyes sharp, her voice low, as if the forest were listening. You're here about the girl, Greta said, her gaze piercing, as if seeing through Anna, into her fears, her hopes, her soul. The one with the book. Anna nodded, her throat tight, her hands trembling, her voice shaking. Lina. My sister. She's not herself. She found a book in the manor, and it's doing something to her. Marta said it's a ledger, a doorway. I don't know what to do. Greta's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes darkening, her voice heavy with the weight of knowledge. The ledger is old, older than Velmont, older than the cliffs, older than the forest. It was made by a cult who sought power, who made a pact with something not of this world. It binds the whispers, the things that live in the shadows. They feed on despair, on fear, on souls. Your uncle opened it, and now your sister has widened the door. How do I close it? Anna asked, her voice breaking, her tears falling, her hands clenching her apron, her nails digging into her palms. Greta's eyes softened, but only slightly, her voice low, warning. The ledger demands a price. Blood to bind it, blood to burn it. But the whispers are clever. They'll fight to keep her. And they'll try to take you, too. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Victor approached Anna in the square, his thin frame shrouded in a dark cloak, his eyes sharp, calculating, his notebook clutched in his hands, its pages filled with symbols that made Anna's skin crawl. I know about the book, he said, his voice low, his eyes fixed on her, as if reading her thoughts, her fears. I've studied its history, the fragments that remain. It's older than you can imagine, tied to a cult that worshipped something ancient, something hungry. The ledger was meant to trap the whispers, but it became their vessel, their way into the world. Anna's heart pounded, her hands tightening on her basket of bread, her voice sharp. What do you want? To help, Victor said, his voice smooth but edged with something she couldn't place, his eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and urgency. Your sister is in danger, but so is Velmont if the whispers are freed. The ledger can be destroyed, but it requires a ritual and sacrifice. Meet me at the church tonight. Bring the girl. Why should I trust you? Anna asked, her voice sharp, her eyes narrowing, her hands trembling. Victor's lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes, their depths cold, calculating. You don't have to. But I know things you don't. And you're running out of time. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Clara, the haunted villager, confronted Anna outside the bakery, her hands trembling, her locket clutched tightly, its symbols gleaming faintly in the dim light. I saw her with it, Clara said, her voice shaking, her eyes wide with fear, her face pale as bone. The book. It took my sister, years ago. She changed, like your sister. Muttered, wrote things, saw things. Then she was gone. Just her shoes by the cliffs. It's back, isn't it? Anna's stomach twisted, her hands shaking as she gripped her basket, her voice trembling. I don't know what you mean. Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking, her hands clutching Anna's arm, her grip desperate. You do. You know. Save her, before it's too late. Save yourself. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Father Matthias confronted Lina that afternoon, arriving at the manor unannounced, his black robe stark against the gray sky, his face pale, his eyes bloodshot, as if he'd been wrestling with demons, his hands trembling as he clutched his rosary. Heinrich and Elise were out, visiting a neighboring town, leaving Lina and Anna alone, the manor silent except for its creaks and whispers. Give me the book, Matthias demanded, his voice low, urgent, standing in the foyer, the air heavy with dust and decay, the portraits watching, their eyes glowing faintly. It's not yours to keep, Lina. Lina clutched the tome to her chest, backing toward the stairs, her boots scuffing the rug, her eyes flickering with something dark, not her own. You can't have it. It chose me. Chose you. Matthias's face twisted, fear and anger warring in his eyes, his hands trembling, the rosary beads clicking. That tome is a doorway, child. You've opened it, and now they're here. They'll take you, piece by piece, until there's nothing left. Anna stepped between them, her hands raised, her voice sharp, her heart pounding. Leave her alone. She's just a kid. If that book's dangerous, why didn't you warn us when we moved here? Why didn't anyone tell us about this place? Matthias's eyes softened, but only for a moment, his voice trembling, heavy with guilt. I tried to protect Velmont. That manor was sealed for a reason. Your uncle, Dietrich, meddled with forces he didn't understand. He thought he could control them, but they consumed him. And now you've brought them back. Lina's head throbbed, the whispers rising to a scream, their voices drowning out everything, filling her mind, her soul. He lies. He wants to trap us. Write the words. Set us free, she stumbled, clutching her temples, the tome falling open at her feet, its pages glowing, the text writhing like snakes, forming words she couldn't read but felt, a pull that made her blood sing, her body tremble. Lina. Anna grabbed her, shaking her, her voice desperate, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with fear. Snap out of it. Lina's eyes rolled back, her body convulsing, her hands clawing at the air, her nails leaving red marks on her skin. Words spilled from her mouth, not her own, layered with voices from the grave, Susurimi Librant. The whispers will rise. Matthias lunged for the tome, but a force knocked him back, slamming him against the wall, the impact shaking the portraits, their frames rattling, their eyes glowing brighter, their mouths twisting into silent screams. The air crackled, the shadows surging, swallowing the light, their forms twisting, hands, faces, eyes that blinked and vanished. Anna screamed, dragging Lina upstairs as Matthias shouted prayers in Latin, his voice trembling, his rosary beads scattering, their clatter lost in the chaos. In Lina's room, Anna barricaded the door with a chair and a trunk, her hands shaking, her breath coming in panicked gasps, her heart racing. Lina lay on the floor, her breathing shallow, her skin gray, her eyes flickering between hazel and black, her body trembling. The tome lay open beside her, its pages blank, as if it had consumed its words, a void waiting to be filled, its leather pulsing faintly, as if alive. We have to destroy it, Anna said, her voice shaking, her hands trembling as she knelt beside her sister, her eyes fixed on the tome, its presence a weight in the room. Whatever it is, it's killing you. Lina's eyes fluttered open, black and depthless, their gaze swallowing the light, heavy with malice. You can't destroy it, she said, her voice layered with others, deep and ancient, a chorus that made Anna's skin crawl, her heart pound. It's part of me now. Anna recoiled, her hands shaking, her voice breaking as she reached for her sister. Lina, fight it. You're still in there. I know you are. Lina's lips curled into a smile that wasn't hers, sharp and cruel, her eyes glinting with something not human, something ancient, something hungry. Lina is gone. Only we remain. Asterisk. Anna refused to surrender, her resolve a fire that burned despite her fear. She dragged Lina to the church that night, following Victor's instructions, ignoring her sister's protests, the way her body resisted, as if pulled back by invisible hands, her movements sluggish, her eyes flickering between hazel and black, her soul slipping away. The tome was never far, clutched in Lina's hands, its leather warm, pulsing, as if feeding on her, growing stronger with each passing moment. Father Matthias and Victor waited at the altar, their faces grim, the air heavy with wax, incense, and something darker, something that made Anna's skin crawl. Matthias had prepared a circle of salt and candles, their flames flickering weakly, casting shadows that moved on their own, their shapes twisting, clawing at the air. A crucifix hung around his neck, and a Bible lay open, its pages marked with notes, blood-smeared, its edges trembling in the draft. Victor stood nearby, his notebook open, its symbols glowing faintly, his eyes sharp, calculating, his hands steady despite the tension. Isolde appeared at the church's edge, her pale hair wild, her eyes too large, her twig doll clutched tightly, its blank face staring into the dark. "They're angry," she whispered, her voice soft but piercing, her eyes fixed on Lina, unblinking. "They want her. They want you all." "This is no ordinary possession," Matthias said, his voice low, his eyes haunted, his hands trembling as he clutched his rosary, the beads clicking softly. "The tome is a chain, binding the whispers to a pact made centuries ago, by a cult that worshipped something beyond this world, its hunger endless, its form unknowable." Victor nodded, his voice smooth but urgent, his eyes fierce. The ledger was meant to trap them, but it became their vessel. They feed on the souls of those who open it, using them to break free. Lina widened the door, and now they're here, in Velmont, in her. Lina laughed, a sound that shattered the church's silence, echoing like broken glass, its edges cutting into the air, cold and sharp. "You think you can stop them? They're here. They always have been." Matthias began the ritual, chanting Latin, his voice steady, then faltering as the air grew colder, the scent of rot and blood overwhelming. He sprinkled holy water, and Lina screamed, her body arching, her nails digging into her arms, blood dripping onto the floor, pooling in the salt circle. The candles flickered, turning blue, then black, their shadows forming claws, mouths, eyes that sang in tongues of chaos, filling the church, drowning out the chants. Anna held Lina's hand, sobbing, her voice raw. "Lina, fight. You're my sister. I need you." Lina's black eyes burned, her voice a chorus of malice, layered with voices that seemed to come from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the air, their weight crushing. "She's gone. Only we remain." The church shook, the windows shattering, their colors bleeding, saints twisting into grotesque forms, their eyes glowing, mouths gaping. Matthias fell, his prayers faltering, his crucifix breaking, the shards scattering. Victor shouted, tracing runes, but the shadows surged, knocking him down, his notebook scattering, pages fluttering like dying birds. Anna dragged Lina, running, the shadows chasing, a tide of darkness, their whispers a scream of hunger and rage. Clara appeared outside, her locket glowing, her voice a desperate plea. "Burn it. Now. Asterisk asterisk asterisk." At the manor, Anna locked them in the attic, her hands shaking, dragging Lina's limp body, her sister's breathing shallow, her skin gray, eyes flickering. The attic was a graveyard of forgotten things, trunks, broken furniture, portraits with accusing eyes, their paint bleeding in the dark. The tome lay open, its pages filling with new words in blood-red ink, asterisk the pact is complete. The whispers are free, asterisk. Anna read, her heart breaking, her voice trembling. What does it want? Lina's lips moved, a rasp, barely audible, her eyes fluttering, hazel for a moment, fleeting. Everything. The attic door rattled, shadows seeping under, curling like smoke, hands, faces, eyes, claws, their hunger a weight in the air. Anna grabbed the tome, flipping through, finding a passage in Lina's hand, ink wet, asterisk to close the door, the ledger must burn. But the price is blood, asterisk. Anna's hands shook, tears falling, her voice raw. She grabbed a rusted knife from the clutter, its edge sharp enough, its weight heavy. The shadows screamed, their forms coalescing, limbs writhing, mouths gaping, eyes burning. "Anna, no," Lina croaked, her voice hers, weak, desperate, her hands reaching, trembling, eyes wide with fear. "I have to," Anna sobbed, slashing her palm, blood dripping onto the tome, its pages hissing, ink bubbling, leather writhing, moaning. She struck a match, the flame trembling, and touched it to the book. The shadows roared, the manor shaking, windows shattering, walls cracking, dust cascading. The tome burned, flames green and sickly, shadows twisting, dissolving into ash, their screams fading into silence, profound and heavy. The tome was embers, the attic silent, shadows gone. Lina lay still, breathing steady, her skin flushed, eyes hazel, weak but hers. Anna collapsed, sobbing, her bloody hand clutching Lina's, the knife falling, its blade stained, a testament to the price paid. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The aftermath was quiet, but not peaceful. The Albrechts fled the manor, moving far away, where the air was light, shadows still. Velmont sealed the church, its doors chained, windows boarded, the manor shunned, cursed, the pines whispering secrets no one dared hear. Lina never wrote again, fearing blank pages, ink, words that might call the whispers back. She spoke little, her laughter gone, her eyes searching corners, expecting shadows, their echoes lingering in her mind. Anna carried guilt like a scar, her palm marked, a reminder of the cost. She dreamed of the tome, its pages blank but whispering, its leather alive, calling her name. Elias left the bakery, wandering the cliffs, haunted by stories now truths. Marta vanished, her stall abandoned, her herbs rotting, perhaps taken by the forest. Greta stayed, carving runes, her silence a warning. Victor was gone, his room empty, perhaps claimed by the whispers. Isolde faded, her doll left on the manor's step, stained with something dark. Clara withdrew further, her locket her only comfort, her eyes hollow. In Velmont, the mist thickened, pines whispered louder, shadows waited, their hunger eternal. Lina woke at night, heart racing, hearing a voice, faint but clear, "We're still here." The tome was gone, but its whispers lingered, etched into her soul, a scar that bled in the dark, a wound that would never heal.